Happy New Year! Welcome to 2017. While I was away on holiday, the Teespring t-shirts arrived. I'm quite happy with them. It's a good fit. So there's a few other super duper fans who have got hoodies and various other bits and pieces. And there's the mug. Quite happy with that. So my last video I showed how I disconnected the packs that I currently have without a BMS. No BMS there and no BMS on the power shelf, which I think you can't see, but anyway. And I'm still running the no BMS experiment. Just to clarify, the reason I'm running these without a BMS is just to see what happens without a BMS to the various groups, and in particular what happens if the BMS you have dies without telling you. As you can see, I've got one sitting here ready to wire up as soon as I finish the experiment. And I'll give you the results of that in a week or so. So I disconnected these. I had this still running. It had 250 watts of solar going into it through the controller, and a couple of small loads running off it. And it is currently sitting at 28 volts, 28, jumping around a wee bit, 28 volts. Whereas these ones here are 27.89, let's call that 27.9 volts. And the power shelf is 27.89. So they're only let's say 0.1 volt out. So I'm just going to plug them back in. I don't need to top them up at all. Sorted. The other thing that I wanted to talk about was a couple of days ago, One Up the Sleeve Customs YouTuber who has an interesting channel did a wee experiment where he blew a hot air gun onto an 18650 until it overheated and vented dramatically out the top. And with watching that, I'll link it in. And it got me thinking about how to mitigate against that situation. So if your cell suddenly or gradually develops a high resistance, then it will heat up. Current flowing through it will cause it to heat up, and if that gets bad enough, then there'll be a thermal runaway, and the nice safety valve, vent valve, will cause it to vent out the top. So it's quite dramatic to see that, but the implication of that is that that problem, A, only occurs at the top of the battery. It doesn't occur at the bottom of the battery. And if you look in the video, there's quite a good stream of ejecta flying out of that. So that does mean that if you are designing your pack, ideally you would have the top of the cell all pointing away from all the other cells. What you don't, ideally what you don't want, if this cell overheats, you don't want to have your design such that when this vents, if this vents, it splits out its heat and its energy directly into the bottom of another cell. So as it turns out, this setup here, if any one of these cells vent, it will go squirting out into the garage, into my pile of junk, and some of it is cardboard, so that's not ideal. I need to tidy up. But it does mean that it doesn't split that out into any of the other cells. There'll be a bit of heat transferred sideways, but looking at that video, most of the energy is being thrown outwards. So, ideally, you don't want to have a situation where your cells, for example, in the HP Powerwall design, if his cell way off here vents into the next group, I don't know to what extent that heat is going to cause damage to the next group. So that's worth thinking about when you're designing your configuration, your layout of how your cells are going to be. So an example of what not to do would be the power shelf suffers the same problem. If this cell down here, or down here, if that cell overheats and vents, it will squirt all its, all the stuff that it vents will hit this next cell. And is that going to be bad enough to cause this cell to overheat, and so on and so on? I don't know. I'm not quite keen to try it. It would be great to know. There's an experiment for someone braver than I. Yeah, so that was the thought that occurred to me when I saw that video. Ideally, you want the cells all facing away from each other, and you could have some kind of fireproof barrier here. Although, if the vent comes out here and hits a barrier really close, for example here, if a cell within here vents, then it's got nowhere to go but in the container. At least here, if a cell vents, it fires out here and the energy gets spread and dispersed fairly quickly. So I'm going to do some more thinking about maybe using some kind of Weldon blanket. You can buy Weldon blankets that are supposed to cope with this kind of high intensity heat. But certainly food for thought. And that's enough for now. Thanks for watching. Cheers.